Hi everyone. Good afternoon and evening to everyone, and welcome to APC webinar series. I'm Shantley, APC Sports Manager. How are you today? Hope everything is going well with you and stay safe. For today's session, it is my pleasure to introduce Mr. John Corson, IWRF Deputy Chair of the Technical Committee and on international technical delegates. Is going to present about introduction to technical aspect of wheelchair rugby. Also here, Ms. Kathy Burke, the IWRF Level 4 International Classifier with us. Kathy will deliver a presentation about wheelchair rugby classification. Before I give you John and Kathy, I'd like to invite Mr. Steve, CEO of IWRF, for his for introduction of today's session and welcome remarks. Steve, please.
Hello, everybody. It's with great pleasure that I introduce the third of these webinars. I think we've done coaching, we've done competitions, and now we're moving into the technical aspects. We've also undertaken an athlete career webinar and panel, and we have thoroughly enjoyed working with the Asian Paralympic Committee over these last few months. And it's been a great pleasure for us to do that, and I thank you for that opportunity, Song. And I look forward to hearing from John and Katie on the technical aspects of the IWRF. And just a point, this is an amazing sport which does so much for people with impairment, but they give back so much in terms of the quality of the sport, the quality of the entertainment, and the first sport which sells out at the Paralympics. So enjoy this webinar, please.
Thank you, Steve.
Hello, I'm John Corson. I'm the Vice Chair of the IWRF Technical Committee, and I'm going to be presenting on the rules and officiating of the sport of wheelchair rugby. This is just a short introduction of the major rules of wheelchair rugby, and it is not intended to be a detailed analysis of the rules and officiating of the sport. Referees in wheelchair rugby are encouraged to use their own discretion when officiating. Therefore, they may choose to play advantage. This is readily done at high level by experienced officials. Referee trainers are available through the IWRF. Please contact us if you need further assistance. The teams that make up the officials at a tournament vary depending on the level of the tournament itself. For local or domestic tournaments, generally these are made up of one head referee, 2 on-court referees, and 4 table officials. At international tournaments, we supplement this with a technical commissioner to assist in the running of the game and referee evaluators to assist in the development and progression of the referees themselves. The court for wheelchair rugby is very similar to that of a basketball court. It is the same size and dimensions. The key differences are our key area that we have at both ends, our goal posts, which are marked here, and our try line, which I'll get into later on. The timing of the game is done in 4 8-minute periods or quarters. There is a 40-second try clock. Each team is assigned 2 60-second timeouts that can be called by a coach and 4 30-second timeouts, which can be called from a player on court. The clock is a stop-start clock, and it stops when the referee blows their whistle and at all timeouts. The clock will start when the ball has been legally inbounded and touched by a player on court. There are 12 players allowed on a wheelchair rugby team. However, no more than 4 players per team are allowed on court at one time. Every player that plays wheelchair rugby is assigned a classification, as will be discussed later on. These classification points range from 0.5 to 3.5 based on the player's ability. The total number of points that the 4 players on court are allowed is 8. However, if a female player is on court at a given time, an extra 0.5 points per female player is added to this 8 points. Being wheelchair rugby, the wheelchair is an important part of our sport. It is important that all wheelchairs are legal and therefore safe for players to play in. Ensuring this, the IWRF has outlined design parameters that will meet these requirements. If in building your own wheelchair or adapting your wheelchair that you've got, you think that a small change to these parameters may appear minor and should be allowed, please bear in mind that they could also compromise player safety. When purchasing chairs for the first time in the country and therefore using new suppliers, if need be, please contact the IWRF for assistance. We have design specifications that we can help your suppliers with. As I mentioned earlier, sport of wheelchair rugby is involved with scoring tries. The most tries wins the game. A try is scored when a player has possession of the ball and wheels 2 wheels over the try line between the 2 posts. 1 point will be awarded for each try scored. This is some examples of tries being scored. You saw there that the player in white backed over the line, whereas the player here just wheels forward over the line. It doesn't matter which of the wheels are used to score the try out of the 4 wheels that a wheelchair has, as long as the player is in possession and they cross the line. It's a sport. There are rules. We have to be conscious of fouls and ensuring that it is a fair sport. There are different types of fouls that we have in our sport. We have fouls that are involved with physical contact, such as illegal use of the hands and holding. Yes, wheelchair rugby is a contact sport, but we need to govern that contact. We also need to govern the contact between wheelchairs. And I'm going to get into this a little bit later with what is called a spinning foul within wheelchair rugby. These are just some of the fouls that are called within wheelchair rugby. Down the bottom of the page here, you'll see that we have also flagrant fouls, which are unsportsmanlike fouls, technical fouls, and disqualifying fouls for those of a very serious nature. As I said, wheelchair rugby is a full contact sport, but not all types of contact are allowed. We need to take into account the position, the location, the speed, and the vulnerability of players to ensure that our sport is a safe and enjoyable sport for all. Unsportsmanlike contact and play is not permitted just for the benefit of illegal aggressive play. We catch a very serious line on this. What we're about to see here are some calls based on illegal use of the hands. Bearing in mind, as I said earlier, a player is allowed to make a play for a ball, but they're not allowed to make contact with another player. So as we see here, the yellow player there was grabbing onto the arm of the white player, thereby causing an illegal use of the hands call. He Here's another example of basically the white player reaching out quickly to grab hold of the black 33. Again, it's an illegal use of the hands call because he impeded the black player scoring the try. This one here is a little bit more obvious, where you can see that the player in black manhandled the green player in an attempt to gather the ball. As I mentioned earlier as well, chair-on-chair contact is allowed as long as it is done legally. And by that, what I mean is if you make head-on-head contact or even head-on-side contact, you can legally hit another chair. If someone is hit from behind the axles of their main wheels and they are put in what the referee deems as danger, we would be looking at a spinning foul. A good example of that can be seen here. As the ball is progressed up the court and passed to the new white player, you'll see that the yellow player hits behind the axle, causing the white player to lose control of their chair and fall out. If we look at it again and we freeze it just here, you can see clearly that the contact is made behind the axle of the chair and therefore is a spinning foul. The sanctions for fouls depend on what is happening in the game, who has possession of the ball, and where the penalty occurred. If an offensive team or a team with control of the ball causes a foul, they will lose possession. If a defensive team causes a foul and the offensive team was in the process of scoring a try, the referee may deem that a try or penalty try will be scored rather than sanctioning the player himself. If it occurs that a goal is not imminent, the referee will report the player to the penalty box for 1 minute or until the offensive team scores a try. Violations are caused by the offensive team. Like basketball, once you've progressed the ball from the back court to the front court, you are not allowed to go back into the back court again or cross the centre line. This is deemed to be a backcourt violation. You have to keep the ball within the bounds of the court. You also have 12 seconds once you gain control of the ball in the back court to progress it to the front court. You have to bounce or pass the ball every 10 seconds. And as I mentioned earlier, you have 40 seconds from when your team gains control of the ball to score a try. If you're in violation of any of these, you will lose team control. The pathway to becoming a referee varies depending on the region and the country in which you are officiating. Generally, however, it starts with a beginner referee course and becoming a novice at your local level. Progressing up through C, B and A level grading as a national referee. Bear in mind that head referees for a country can look at your ability when you come into the sport and decide that you do not need to fulfill all of these grades and may enter at either a B or an A level referee if you have the appropriate ability. Once you have shown your skills at your A level within your country, you can be then put forward to be certified at international level. Once you've gained this international certification, we separate the referees into both zonal level referees and world level referees. The IWRF referee candidate policy is available on IWRF IWRFofficials.com. Thank you very much. In summary, if you need any further resources around rules or officiating, this is available on IWRF.com or IWRFofficials.com. Thank you.
Thank you, John, for your presentation. Let us move on to the next topics, which will be presented by Ms. Katie. So, Katie, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Hi, everyone, and thanks for joining us in this session on classification. My name's Katie, and I am a classifier in wheelchair rugby and paracycling. Now, this is a pre-recorded session. However, all things going well, I will be joining the session. So if you have any questions as we go, please type them in through the chat and I'll try and answer them as we go, or there will be a section at the end where you can ask questions as well. So like I said, I am a classifier for both wheelchair rugby and paracycling. I've been involved in wheelchair rugby since 2007. I've worked as both a classifier as well as a trainer for some of our classifiers. I've also done some advisory work in local and regional development programs. And by background, I am a physiotherapist. So for the next 15 minutes or so, I'm going to talk to you about the role and function of the classification system and how it relates to wheelchair rugby. I'll talk about the classifiers and the classification process, as well as giving you a high-level overview of the athlete classes. I will include some information sources at the end, so if you want to seek more information from somewhere, hopefully these will be useful as well. A few words on the scope of this session. This session is not intended to turn you into a classifier. What it is designed to do is give you some information on the classification process and help you understand how classification fits into the sport overall. But I also want to start by addressing a question that we do get asked a lot, which is, do athletes need to be classified to be able to play? And this largely depends on what you're trying to achieve with your competition. So often when you're getting things started at a grassroots level, it's about building participation and getting more people involved in the sport. And at this level, you can largely set your own rules, and that includes rules around classification and who can and can't play. So to give you an example, the city where I live in has quite a small group of athletes playing wheelchair rugby, and in order to support a viable competition, they do actually have a few able-bodied players who participate to help them get their numbers up. Where classification becomes important is when you're starting to develop athletes and teams towards more formal and international competition structures. At this point, you need to understand classification so that you know who's going to be eligible to play at this level, but also what types of roles athletes will fall into and what types of roles they should be training towards when they're playing in their teams. So this is an important thing to keep in mind as we go through the session. And I'm going to talk about eligibility and class, but I'm talking about this from the point of view of an IWRF sanctioned international competition. You can interpret this looser at a local level if you're trying to build more participation. Classification serves two main roles in parasport. It determines eligibility for a sport, and it also groups athletes for competition. So in determining eligibility, this is made up of both an eligible impairment type and a minimum impairment criteria. And I'm going to expand on those more shortly for the sport of wheelchair rugby. Grouping of athletes for competition is based on the allocation of a sport class in line with defined sport class profiles for each sport. So in rugby, we have 7 sport classes that range from 0.5, which is the low functioning athlete, up to 3.5, which is our higher functioning athletes. In a team sport like rugby, you can have 4 athletes on the court and they can only make up 8 points. So the role a player plays on court is largely determined by their sport class criteria, where you have a balance of high and low point athletes required to build that maximum 8-point team. So eligible impairments, the International Paralympic Committee has determined 10 eligible impairment types across all their different para sports. The 5 impairment types that I have highlighted here are the eligible impairment types for wheelchair rugby. So impaired muscle power might be from a peripheral nerve injury or a spinal cord injury. Limb deficiency might be from a congenital limb deformity or an acquired limb amputation. And hypertonia, ataxia, and athetosis are types of movement disorders that are often found with cerebral palsy or with an acquired head injury. The minimum impairment that somebody must have in order to play wheelchair rugby is that they must be impaired in all 4 limbs, or they must have an impairment in 3 limbs plus limited trunk function. So there are more details on how we assess the minimum impairment eligibility in our classification manual, but this is a really good guide if you're starting to look at athletes and wonder whether they're going to be able to play wheelchair rugby or not. So next I want to talk about the classifiers. So the classifiers for any parasport are the people who implement the classification system for that sport. So each sport will determine the requirements to be a classifier and what the formation of a panel, which is the group of classifiers, will look like. So in wheelchair rugby, classifiers are accredited through the IWRF system, and they must have a relevant health professional background. So a physiotherapist or a rehab physician or an occupational therapist, for example. We work in panels of 3 with a mixture of experience levels, which helps us develop our own classifiers as well. In developing nations who are still developing their rugby program, there are ways that we can support the development of local people to help provide classification supports to you with provisional pathways to bring people up so they can work at that international level with us and gain that experience. So at the end of the session, when I put up some details for more information, please reach out and let us know, and we can work with you on how to develop classification supports. So taking a look at the process of the classification, this is what we do when we implement the classification system. So this starts with confirmation of an eligible impairment type, where an athlete will supply us with some medical information that confirms the presence of an eligible health condition, which we talked about the eligible impairment types before. Next, we'll do a bench test, which is where we will assess the impairment that somebody has. So for somebody who's presenting with, say, impaired muscle strength, we might do some strength testing. Someone who presents with spasticity, we might then do some spasticity scores or some coordination testing. We'll then do some functional skills observation. This is where we get the athlete in their chair with their playing equipment, and we put them through a range of drills and exercises to really assess what is the translation of that functional impairment into skills that an athlete might use during the wheelchair rugby game. So we might get them pushing their chair, stopping, starting, turning. We'll also look at ball skills, so catching, passing, dribbling, and holding the ball. Following this, we'll give them their starting class that they'll start in a competition, and then we'll observe them in their competition to see what happens to them in a game where they're playing for longer, where they're under greater pressure, to really start to see, what are the limitations of that athlete, and are what we're seeing on court, does it fit with everything that we assessed in the earlier parts? So it's the process of classification. But now what I want to do is take a really high level look at the different classes that we have in wheelchair rugby, and give you an idea of what you might see in these athlete profiles. I'm going to break this up into low pointers, mid pointers, and high pointers, because this is often the easiest way to think about it. So we're going to start by looking at the low point athletes. These are the 0.5s, 1.0s, and 1.5s. They tend to be the slower athletes on court. They'll have limited arm strength and minimal hand function. Most of them will also have pretty much no trunk control, so you'll see them strapped into their chairs, and they're going to have a really limited ability to handle the ball or to throw the ball. Some of the 1.5s might be able to inbound when they've got time to set up a pass, but they're not going to be the major ball handlers during a game. The midpoint players are the 2s and the 2.5s. They tend to have very good chair speed and control around the court, but they probably still have little to no trunk function, so they're still going to be strapped in. And whilst their arms will be stronger, they're still going to have impaired hand function, where what you'll see is most of the time they still need to use 2 hands to control the ball well on court. The high point players are the 3s and the 3.5s. These athletes will be very fast and very strong in their chairs. You're probably going to see that they're the primary ball carriers in a team. Now, often these athletes fit into one of 2 sport profiles. You'll either see someone who has very good hands, probably not quite normal, with not much trunk strength, or very good strong trunk strength and a good hand, but no hand on the other side. So the athlete you can see in the picture here has good trunk strength. You can see from the way he's turned in his chair, a really good hand, that he's holding that ball really solidly with one hand. What you can't see there is there's no hand on the other side and no legs. Next thing I want to talk about is some of the other factors that people often bring up with us when they're looking at athletes, particularly if you're just looking at somebody playing on the court and you're thinking what class they might be. Training and athletic ability are not classifiable parts of somebody's function. So what do I mean by this? If you get a new athlete who comes out and perhaps they've never pushed themselves around in their day chair before, and you get them into a chair on court, they're going to be slow, they're not going to be able to handle their chair very well, and their coordination's probably not going to be great. We wouldn't class them down based on this. We would still look at all of the other assessment factors that we've looked at. We would expect that as somebody is then able to train and use a chair more, that there's a training effect there and they will actually get stronger, get fitter, and get more coordinated. So that can be a tricky thing for a lot of new athletes and developing teams, is while you're still building that training effect and athletic ability, athletes are going to look a lot more impaired than perhaps they are. And I have had people before, you give an athlete a class and the first thing they do is they look at the best athlete that they know in that class and think they could never be as good as them. Give them time, give them training, and they'll get better. So I want to finally point out some places you can get some more information. So the International Wheelchair Rugby Federation has a great website, and there's a classification page on this where you'll be able to access everything from some really basic information on classification right through to the really detailed classification manual if you want more detailed information. The IWRF Regional Development Committee is another really great resource and a great point of contact if you want to get more information or if you need assistance with anything. Like everyone this year, we're all learning to do things a little bit differently as well to stay connected and to stay involved with people. And we have started using technology a lot more to provide support for classification. So I would hope that this will continue into the future. So as you're developing programs, if you need support with classification, please reach out through the IWRF contacts, and I'm sure we can connect you with people, you know, even using video conferencing to help you get going, to talk through things and to look at things with you, can be a really great way to provide those supports. So that brings us to the end of the introductory session on classification. If you have any questions, please pop them through. I think there's a chat function you can add them to.
Thank you, Katie. Actually, we received one question for you that from the name is Boon. The question is, I'd like to know what is the highest classification for a quad amputee based on your experience?
So a quad amp, or somebody who has amputations in all 4 limbs, the highest classification would be a 3.5, and a lot of them do fit into that 3.5, but it depends on how significant the amputations are as to whether they will fit into lower classes or not, I guess is the short answer to that. So we do have some athletes where the amputations might be much, much higher up, and they're going to be lower functioning players than somebody who's just missing a few fingers. Does that answer the question?
Another question from Mohammed Ifan. One leg amputee is eligible for wheelchair rugby?
At an IWRF sanctioned event, no. If that was the only impairment, no. You must have an impairment in all 4 limbs or 3 limbs plus trunk. So most amputees are going to have very strong trunks, so they must have an impairment in all 4 limbs. However, if you're getting started and you need more people around, then you can absolutely get them playing. That's not a problem. You just need to know that they're probably not going to be eligible as you move up into higher level of competition.
The question from Lahapa Mishar. Which company wheelchair best to wheelchair rugby?
I'll take that, Sean. We've had that several times over. As an international federation, we cannot provide one wheelchair rugby company over another, or any company that actually manufactures sports chairs. What we can do is provide advice on specifications for chair manufacturing, but all rugby chairs that you see played at the Paralympic and world level are fantastic chairs.
Yeah, I hope this make you very clear this time, and you will not have any question for this kind of equipment related to question. I mean, okay.
That's fine.
Yeah. The question from Haider. In Iraq, we don't practice wheelchair rugby. How can I become a referee or classifier in the IWRF?
If that person would like to email development@iwrf.com or contact us through the website, we have been in contact in the last 5 or 6 years with a couple of different people in Iraq who are looking to develop the game. And while there isn't a wheelchair rugby team there that I know of, there are definitely other people interested. So please get in touch. We can direct you to appropriate people that are keen to get the game up and running. And we can also deliver you information on pathways for officiating and classification if you're interested.
I have one question regarding the competition schedule for next year. You know, 2021 is gonna be a big year because there will be Tokyo Paralympic as well. But at the same time, you know, we are all living in these difficult times due to COVID-19, and many of competition and events have been canceled since the early this year. I just wondering that all the qualification competition event for the Tokyo for the next year already confirmed. Also, other regional or international level competition of wheelchair rugby also have been confirmed.
I can pass that to our technical delegate or our CEO to answer in a bit more depth, but I can tell you in terms of regional qualification and zonal competitions, we're looking at the very end of 2021 and early 2022 for our usual zonal competitions. But happy to throw to either John or Steve regarding Paralympic qualification if you'd like to make a statement on that.
Currently, in terms of the Tokyo 2021 competition, we're using the same qualified teams that had qualified in terms of 2020. So those teams have been locked in. And as Cherie had said, there will be some qualification tournaments for our zone tournaments later on in we're looking at late 2021 and early 2022 for those to be occurring, especially within the Asian region.
Yeah, the first international competition we have on the list is in June in Poland, which is our European Division B. Then there will be a competition in Canada, which is known as Canada Cup, which is a competition which usually the Paralympic qualified teams will participate in, but isn't an IWRF competition in that sense, but it's a sanctioned or approved competition. And then the next one is at the end of, which I think is the Americas, at the end of 2021. And then we move into European A and Asia in the first quarter of 2022.
Cherie and John, Kathy, whose exercise to wrist power increase?
I wonder if it's a general question about strength and training and wrist power. And if it is, I would say all of these things depend on the individual. And if you have a therapist or a coach or somebody who's good with movement involved, then they're going to be the best person to give you individual advice. Generally, though, we would say that training and activity and sport in general is going to increase your strength in everything. So the general advice is get training and playing. The individual advice is actually have somebody, though, who knows your impairment and knows what you need to help do your programming.
I have just seen that next question in the chat, which says, please arrange competitions in Southeast Asia. We'd love to arrange an Asian competition in Southeast Asia. So if, Cherie, do you want to take that one on again?
Absolutely. We have competitions in Southeast Asia, I'd like to begin with. We have competitions happening in Indonesia and Singapore and in Thailand in a pre-COVID world on a reasonably regular basis. There's several competitions a year organised locally within the region. In a post-COVID world, hopefully that will continue and grow with more teams and more sanctioned competitions. The last big competition we did have was at the end of 2018, which was held in Thailand, and was a very successful regional competition and was our first regional development competition that is a tier 2 event leading to our bigger zonals. So Asia is rapidly developing. We are still open to bids for a country willing to host the zonal event in early 2022. Time is running out, but we are more than happy to work with you on filling in a bid document for that or looking ahead to 2024. But there are other events in between that are happening. So please just get in touch. There's definitely events in Southeast Asia.
If you have any further questions, just contact directly IWRF or just contact APC office. Then I will make sure that you will get your answers. Okay. Well, I have to say it has been a really great pleasure with IWRF. Fantastic 3 sessions and really great opportunities for our member countries, athlete coaches, and people who are interested in wheelchair rugby to get knowledge and information from basic level to sport specific one. So I really like to encourage our NPC to practice these sports, lovely sports in your country if you don't have yet. And keep up good work and develop the sports. If you practice already, I'm sure IWRF is always around you and support you. APC as well.
Sorry for jumping in at the very last minute. Just a few words to thank you guys. I cannot really thank you enough. Sherry, Kathy, John, and everybody in International Wheelchair Rugby Federation for your time and commitment. And it has been, we've been listening to you and watching you in many occasions. Last week also, we were very pleased to have you on our first ever Athletes Forum. And I'm sure we will see together the fruit of this cooperation between us on the ground very soon with the growth of wheelchair rugby in the region. And on behalf of the APC board and the management team, really a big thank you for your time and the knowledge sharing to our beloved athletes and experts in Asia. And I'm looking forward to stronger and closer relationship with you. Maybe we can probably out of record discuss also about signing an MOU for development of wheelchair rugby in different aspects in the region, either through the creation of teams and the NPCs, also educating the coaches, officials, classifiers in Asia. And yeah, this is just a quick passing by chance. Actually, I was in another meeting and I wanted to jump in. I'm lucky to catch you before you close the session. Thank you again, and we will keep in touch through emails and hopefully to meet you physically very soon. Thanks a lot.
Just to say, it's been an absolute privilege to work with the APC over the last couple of months. We've speak on behalf of everyone that's been involved, and there's been quite a few people behind the scenes involved in these webinars, not just the faces that you've seen each time, but we have felt really privileged to showcase our sport and create more awareness and educate those interested in becoming involved in our global family. So thank you very much for the opportunity, and we welcome any inquiries at any stage and in any part of our sport. So we'd love to work together more closely. Thank you.
Thank you.
And
Mr.
if I may
Steve,
say so, yeah, if I may say so, we have thoroughly enjoyed working with you over these last few months, and we look forward to working with you closely going forward. And the more we cooperate, the more we will grow Paralympic sport in general, but specifically wheelchair rugby. So thank you.
Thank you, Steve. All right. Thank you, everyone, for your time. And I'd like to conclude today's session and hope to see you all again in the next webinar series. Until that time, please stay safe and healthy. Have a nice day and bye-bye. And if you have any question, just get back to me and get back to IWRF. Okay. Bye-bye, everyone.